Hello everyone, welcome back to the Mr. Flippogan YouTube channel. I'm Mr. Flippogan, but you can call me Mel. And oh boy, it's been a while. It's been maybe 1 or 2 months. A lot of things, oh not a lot, but a few things have happened during this time, which have kind of uh, hindered my will and ability to make YouTube videos these past months. Well, one of those, or one of the things that happened was that I went on a trip to Italy, which was pretty interesting. It was a 2 week trip. We went to Milano, Firenze or Florence, and of course Venezia or Venice. That's the, I believe, anglicized version or whatever. And it was pretty interesting. I actually got to see the Viribus Unitises, what is it called, Anchor, in Maritime Museum in Venice. And you can also actually go and see it yourself. It's free to see. It's outside, right outside the museum. I'll probably slap up a picture of me in front of the anchor. It was pretty nice, and it was honestly a nice little surprise to see when I got there. And I did make a separate video on the Virebus Unitis, so if you haven't checked it out already, then check the information card on the right side of the screen, and it should pop up and you can watch it after this video or before watching this video, which no, just stay here. And when I came back from Italy, I got sick, and I've been sick for this past week. I've been coughing a lot, and I've not had a good time, honestly. But from what I know, it's not COVID. I took a COVID test. It came out negative, and it would suck, honestly, if I got COVID, because I've already had COVID one time. So imagine getting COVID twice. That would not be very nice at all. But anyway, okay, I'm going off topic, sorry. Let's actually get into the point of the video, which is another ship review. Today we are actually taking a look at the Pan American or Brazilian Tier 8 battleship, the Atlântico. The Atlântico was a ship you could get through the dockyard during the updates 0.11.3 to 0.11.5. Currently this ship is not purchasable anymore since, well, the dockyard is over and they don't make dockyard ships available after the dockyard has gone. So who knows how long it will be until they release this thing for direct purchase or any other means in the future. We haven't gotten the Odin for direct purchase yet, and it's been like 2 or 3 years since the Odin dockyard first came out, so it will probably be a really long time until we get the Atlântico for direct purchase of some kind, but we'll see. My commander build and modules are on the screen. I only have a 14-point commander currently, but I have circled the next recommended skills in green highlighter. Well, they're the skills that I will probably go for when I train my commander and get more commander skill points. Yeah, you can look at them if you want to copy my build for whatever reason. The Atlântico has no real basis in real life. It's basically a figment of wargaming's imagination within the boundaries of being a hypothetical British-built Pan-American battleship for World War I. Of course, it's not quite World War I. It's more like a World War I ship, but with a World War II refit, and I say that because it has a lot of anti-aircraft guns, something you would not find on a World War I ship, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Instead of going on random tangents about the nitty-gritty of this basically purely fictional ship, let's take a look at the stats. And I want to try something a bit different today. I want to go over the pros and the cons of the ship, and while I'm going through them, I will pick up the different statistics and bring them to light in more detail. But for the main battery guns, I will have to both talk about the pros and the cons for them, since they're a mixed bag. They're not really a direct pro or a direct con. But yeah, let's actually take a look at them. The Atlântico boasts 10 381mm guns, which is a really nice amount. They have an average reload of around 30 seconds and are actually pretty reliable from my experience, with a 234 meter max dispersion and a 1.80 sigma value. I find that I can rely on these guns. most of the time. I usually dislike battleships and battleship gameplay since I feel like they always have wonky dispersion, and I tend to be very unlucky with my shots. Shots that usually feel like they should citadel, don't citadel, they may overpen, they may shatter, they may dip into the water before even hitting the target, they may go everywhere else than on the target, but not with Atlantico. I actually find the Atlantico to be one of the most consistent battleships at its tier. Of course, this is from my experience, and I believe from a more factual and objective standpoint, the guns are relatively accurate and relatively consistent. They may be wonky sometimes, but from my experience, they work fine, and my shells hit the targets more often than they don't. That's from my experience. Now the guns do have their cons too. First of all, 381mm is actually quite a small gun size for tier 8, and the shell alpha damage is also pretty low in comparison to, well, the North Carolina and Vladivostok. Both of those ships have 406mm guns, and the Amagi has 410mm guns. With 381mm guns, you can only overmatch 26mm of armor, which means that you can't overmatch ships with 27mm. And there are cruisers at tier 8 that do have over 26mm armor, which means that if they angle properly, you may see some bounces here and there. Now the thing is that a good amount of same tier battleships actually do have 381mm guns, like the Monarch, and the Richelieu actually only has 380mm guns, but what they have to compensate for their low penetration values is high explosive ammunition, a choice the Atlantico doesn't get. This makes it more difficult for the Atlantico to fight against super heavily armored targets, or targets that are angled that you can't overmatch. Some more pros about the guns is that they do have good firing angles, which means that you don't have to show too much broadside, and the turning rate is also pretty fast, so you can get your guns to bear relatively quickly. Atlantico's max firing range is only 18.6 kilometers though, which is quite low for a battleship. This means that it needs to get in closer to the enemy to actually use them, and while it's slightly restricting, I haven't been bothered about it too much. The Atlantico has other strengths to compensate for the short range anyway. In general though, I believe the pros outweigh the cons concerning the guns, which is why I believe that the guns are, in short, one of the good sides of this ship. The anti-aircraft is also pretty good for a tier 8 battleship that's supposedly designed during World War I. It can definitely shoot down planes and leave a hole in tier 6 aircraft carrier's reserves, but if the enemy aircraft carrier is same tiered, or a tier 10, then they can relatively easily kill you if they are determined. And now for the secondary guns. The secondaries are probably one of the Atlantico's biggest strength, since, I mean, this is a secondary ship if the replay didn't tell you straight. It comes with 10 127mm secondaries and 16 234mm secondaries, which, I mean, the latter ones, for your information, those are the same size as the main battery guns on the tier 10 cruiser Goliath. Yeah. Well, sadly, the secondaries do only have a base range of 7.4 kilometers, but when fully spec'd you can actually get them to around 10.8 kilometers range. Another strength that actually assists the secondaries of the Atlantico is its concealment. It has a 14.6 kilometer base range, which is a bit big, but you can get it down to a nice 11.5 kilometers using the appropriate upgrades, which means that there is only a 700 meter dead space between your concealment range and your secondary battery firing range, which means that if you get spotted, then your secondaries will most likely be able to start firing at the ship that is spotting you. And of course, for the secondary battleship to be effective, it needs to be tanky, and the Atlantico is tanky alright. First off, it has a relatively small superstructure, which means that HE or small caliber AP may have trouble hitting and penetrating it. The whole armor is very strong, and it does also have a turtle back, which protects the citadel, and what also protects the citadel is the fact that it's below the waterline, so you probably won't be getting at citadeled in the Atlântico that much. If you take any damage, then it's either probably from torpedoes or from massive AP pens. But I personally find that citadels are pretty rare in this thing. Now for the cons. First off, her base HP pool is on the lower side at around 60,100 HP. Of course, it's not the worst at its tier, but you tend to want more HP as a brawler. Of course, it's nowhere as bad as the Odin, so this is definitely a lot more workable, and the armor, from my experience, tends to compensate for the HP. The Atlântico has also a very narrow range of consumables. It only gets damage control and damage repair party. So you don't get any spotting planes to increase your main battery range, you get no fighters or defensive Aea for defending against planes, and you get no hydroacoustic for the pesky torpedoes that may hit you when you push up. So you get the idea, there are not a lot of gimmicks in this ship concerning the consumable department. And finally, the biggest weakness of the Atlântico is that this thing is as slow as a snail and as maneuverable as a brick. Going 25 knots base with a turning radius of 800 meters and a rudder shift of 14.8 seconds. With the speed flag and the brisk skill, you can get your speed up to like 28.7 knots, which is a lot better than 25 knots, but it still leaves a lot to be desired, especially as someone who has maybe played something like a North Carolina or a Bismarck that are pretty damn quick for battleships, you know? Just saying. Before we get to the verdict, I still want to touch upon the cosmetics of this ship. The base camo is kind of and standard, but for the people who built it in the dockyard, which, I mean, everyone built it in the dockyard, you also got a absolutely stunning looking warpaint camo, which, hot damn, I do love the look of this thing. You can also fly Atlântico under the Pan American flag, but why would you when you could fly it under the Brazilian flag, which I personally prefer the latter, but it sadly doesn't display in the replays, so. And you also get the Atlântico's commemorative flag from the dockyard. It's unique, but it's not the most interesting in my opinion. There have definitely been more interesting commemorative flags in this game. So, the verdict. To be honest, I find Atlântico to be a really good ship. And it's probably one of my favorite dockyard ships ever, actually. I remember back when the Odin was released, it's a secondary ship, it has torpedoes, it has secondaries, but it's very squishy. And it being very squishy makes pushing and brawling a bit uninviting. So I never really stuck with that ship, and I never really wanted to play it after it came out, because it was tasked with a mission, and it kind of sucks at that mission. But Atlântico is a whole other story. It takes the brawling playstyle, and it does it exceptionally well in my opinion. Its armor, very thick armor at that, helps it tank, and its low superstructure makes it difficult for HE to pen you. So many times in World of Warships I find that I can come out from a battle and I've tanked like 2.5 million damage, or even 3 million damage, or maybe even higher than that. So it can definitely do its task of tanking very properly. And the secondaries contribute a lot to the brawling close-range playstyle, and they hit like trucks, let me tell you. And honestly, it's very satisfying just to see them popping off like pam, and chunking enemy ships for like 1k, 2k, 3k, 4k damage per shot, which is honestly just... It's very spicy and it looks cool. It's just very funky in general. I think the only problems this thing has concerning the its brawling playstyle is the fact that it doesn't have hydroacoustic and the fact that it doesn't have torpedoes. Of course, in my opinion, if it had torpedoes, then it would honestly probably be quite overpowered, somewhat overpowered at least. And hydroacoustic, well, it is nice to have, it's not mandatory. And if you know what you're doing, and if you're not stupid, if you're actually smart, unlike me, then you can probably actually, you know, vary your speed or turn to different directions in order to dodge the torpedoes. And again, going back to the tankiness, it being so tanky actually makes it a really, really good or a really, really nice ship for potentially beginners or less experienced players, since it is quite forgiving in my experience. Like, of course, if you sail broadside, then people are going to smash you, but in general, if you angle, then you're generally pretty safe. You tend to not be overmatched from the bow or from the stern, and it has a nice concealment range to the point that, okay, if you take too much fire, you can often just go undetected and go off the radar and recover slightly from whatever mistake you may have done. I think the biggest mistakes you can do in this ship is probably sailing into torpedoes, because this thing is a fat thing, it's slow, it doesn't turn well. If torpedoes get your broadside, then well, see you in port. If you have trouble with dodging torpedoes or avoiding them, then you can actually spec into the Vigilance skill, which gives an improved torpedo acquisition range and better torpedo protection, I believe. I personally have put it on my Verdi, and it works well. My Verdi has been quite a torpedo magnet, so Vigilance has helped me quite considerably. But of course I find that Brisk is more mandatory than Vigilance. It's a choice, you can get it, you don't have to get it, anything works. This is a spec to taste kind of a deal. I think my biggest problem with this ship is honestly it being Pan-American. And no, I'm not saying that because I'm racist. I'm saying that because the Atlântico really, really needs a good captain. I found that with a captain below 14 skill points, it's a bit difficult to live and a bit difficult to play. Because honestly, the Atlântico gets a lot of its utility and a lot of its fun and a lot of its strengths from the captain skills. You get the secondary build, you get the secondary range, and you get the concealment. You get brisk, so you don't have to move as slow as a snail. These are big things for the Atlântico. But if you don't have a captain, if you haven't trained a captain for the Atlântico, then it's just not that good. Then, well, the Atlântico with a base 0-point captain is just not good at all. So the fact that there are no other tech tree ships, no other free premium ships, most players will just not have a well-spec'd Pan-American captain, which, well, without one, it's not that nice to play. But in short, if you want to play Atlântico well, and if you want to have fun in it, then you really need to spec into the captain. And of course, while a 10-point captain is good, it works, I honestly think that you really need to go for the 14-point captain to actually get it to start excelling. But you really need those 10 to 14 points to actually get this thing to be a solid secondary close-in ship. Anyway, this has been my take on the Atlântico. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. This was probably a bit of a longer video. Anyway, before I go on rambling about different stuff, I'll probably end the video here. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you liked it, leave a dislike if you disliked it, leave a comment if you want to give constructive criticism, or sounded like someone just fell upstairs. I'm a bit scared now. Anyway guys, remember to stay awesome, keep flipping, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!